Like the academic reputation is an advantage for us. And so if you believe that, and of course you have to be great at the X's and O's, you got to deeply believe that this is an opportunity to change the trajectory of lives for young people. And you got to be a dog and want to win.
Welcome back to The Deal. I'm Jason Kelly alongside my partner, Alex Rodriguez. Man, I've been looking forward to this one in part because if you're talking to the athletic director of Vanderbilt, that probably means that college football is on the horizon, which it is. And it is an amazing time to be a Vanderbilt Commodore. So, Candice Story-Lee, welcome to the show. So excited to talk to you, not just about your school, but about the state of college sports and everything. So welcome.
Thank you so much for having me.
All right. So, Alex, you and I sort of come at college sports from different perspectives. You grew up in Miami, looking at University of Miami. You've got a couple daughters in college. I've got a couple boys who have graduated from college. But I grew up down south, and college football is a religion. And I guess I would start, Candice, by asking you what you did, in short, to bring Vanderbilt athletics to where it is today, because I'm going to keep it a bean. When I was a kid growing up down in Atlanta and in Texas, Vanderbilt, it was an easy dub. You were very happy to see them on your schedule. And now it's a hard game, and almost, you're going to have a tough time. So what did you do? How'd you make this happen?
I appreciate that. 2020, everybody thinks about 2020 as, the year of COVID. And yes, there was a global pandemic going on, but what also happened in 2020 was we got a new chancellor at Vanderbilt and a new athletic director. And with humility, I just say that having the opportunity to step into the role at a time where there was so much going on in the world, every time I talk about the transformation, because I think that's the right word, every time I talk about the transformation, I start with the ability for me, the empowerment that I was given by our chancellor to, execute on a different vision, a broader vision for what Vanderbilt athletics can be. And I think the most important thing is that we change the narrative by first changing how we thought about ourselves internally. It's really important. And so when you talk about like Vanderbilt being an easy dub, I accept, you step into the seat, you accept everything that comes with the role, including the history, right? And the reality is that as an institution, we had not always consistently invested in athletics here. That's just the truth. And I think in part, I would never sit here and try to speculate, because I think that you have to look at the conditions in context, right? So I can just say, as one who's been on campus for a long time, I do think maybe perhaps it was not wanting to undercut the academic rigor and the academic selectivity that we're known for. I think what we've shown over the last 5 years, and we had shown in glimpses historically, like Vanderbilt baseball was probably the only thing you were talking about for a long time relative to Vanderbilt athletics, right? They were able, in spite of, to do some incredible things, and Tim Corbin has built what I believe is the best baseball program in the country. But what happened over the last 5 or 6 years is we started to act like the charter members of the SEC that we are, and decided that rather than sort of use the things that are unique to Vanderbilt as excuses, the high academics, the smaller alumni base, the fact that we're the smallest private school in the SEC, I always felt like if given a chance, we could thrive, but we had not given ourselves a chance. And so our new chancellor unlocks resources to give us a chance. We began to talk about vision and strategy before we even have put the resources behind it. But we changed the way we were talking about ourselves internally. I can't expect you, Jason, or like A-Rod, I can't expect you guys to believe in something that we don't seem to believe in about ourselves.
Right.
And that's really, really important. It'd almost be easier to just start over, right? To start from scratch and to take something that's entrenched. But every day, just trying to challenge the language that we're using and the ability to unhook from the past. I don't run away from it, because it is a part of who we are. And you got to take good and bad. but it doesn't have to be the thing. Like our DNA doesn't have to be fixed on the history. I do feel like we've taken some great steps. You got to be good. You got to invest. You got to be lucky, and prayerfully things are lining up for us. And I'm deeply appreciative because, as you all know, right, in sports, it's a team effort. So I'm certainly happy to lead the charge from an athletic standpoint, but it has taken every single person affiliated to buy in. And so we've been shifting the narrative and then
Yeah.
executing behind it. And, I never ever guarantee wins, but I will bet on us if we put ourselves in position to compete. And that takes resources, and that takes attitude, and that takes the right mind shift. And we're finally doing that.
I love this missionary love story between you and Vanderbilt. I mean, it is the ultimate missionary story. Someone with your talents, you have 3 more degrees than I have, a master's and a PhD and a doctorate in education. I guess 2 things. What is it about Vanderbilt that has talked to your soul so much, 1? And 2, did your parents advocate around education?
Oh, that's great. I have always been, I said this a little bit before, but I thought if we gave ourselves a chance at Vanderbilt, I think the sky is the limit. I have always believed that. When I came here at 17, the women's basketball program was very good and had been very competitive, and I wanted to play in the SEC, and I was drawn to it immediately when I came to visit. But the thing that I understood even as a teenager was that this place was going to challenge me. It was going to create a beautiful environment for me to grow, but it was going to challenge me. And thank goodness I know a little bit more today than I knew at 17, but I did at 17 know that that was going to be an important part of my growth. And I think we continue to do that, to provide this incredible opportunity for young people where you can challenge them, but also care and support them. I love that. I think we kind of hold both of those things together better than anywhere. And I never set out to stay at Vanderbilt this long, just being honest. But the reality is that I found every single time I just continued to have opportunities to grow and to sort of live out my values. And from a quality of life standpoint, that's so important. And then the chance to kind of give back. My parents, great question about my parents. My father's a retired lieutenant colonel in the Army. My mom retired from NASA. They're very, from a professional standpoint, education was so important to what they did. And they always encouraged my brother and I, like academics was first. Sports was something I kind of got to do as an extracurricular. And then as a very tall girl at a young age, it gave me a safe place, and it gave me some confidence. But academics was always really important and was the primary thing. So Vanderbilt sort of fit me from a value standpoint. But I wanted to fit me from the competitive standpoint too, and we say to people, right, this is a place that's one of one. You can be a champion in so many ways, and you don't have to forego one area for another. That's what I think is special about this place.
And so, Candice, being in the SEC is in a lot of ways, a privileged position. And you pointed out,
Absolutely.
Vanderbilt's a charter member. Take us inside the SEC right now, because, even from the time you got there as a student to even from the time that you arrived as the AD in 2020, the SEC nothing really happens in college sports without the SEC.
Mm-hmm.
What happens next for the SEC? Like, what do you think is the next big step forward? And we can, break it down among sports, but, it's the leading voice. What do you think the most important next step for the SEC is in the contours of the business of college sports?
I mean, Jason, I couldn't agree with you more in terms of, I was just talking to a good friend of mine who was transitioning into a new role as an athletic director. And we were just talking about, at this moment in time in the current landscape, where you want to be. And I think you want to be in the SEC, and
Yeah.
and that's no disrespect to any other conference, but I would agree with you that I think that change that happens, we feel like as a league, we're going to be a pivotal part of that change. And we are in such a disruptive time in college athletics. That leadership is desperately needed. This is an open question about what is next. I think You've got all of these things going on at the same time, right? We have the advent of NIL and what that means from an open market and just the economic model for student athletes and what that looks like now. Congress is going to have to help us figure out a true national framework within which all of us can operate with some consistency. I hope that as the fall progresses, that we see the Protect College Sports Act actually move forward in the process. The SEC has to be a part of any big changes that happen. I think we're at a point now where we need to come to grips with the fact that amateurism, the way that we knew it, has changed. But the commitment to a student athlete in the collegiate model, that has continuously been updated, and it needs to stay modern, but we don't need to abandon it. And I think if you sat around the table and talked to every athletic director in the SEC, and I would argue every athletic director, period, we don't want to throw the collegiate model away. But we do have to understand that you have to take a fresh look, right? We have to be more thoughtful. You have to be more innovative. Things are changing, right? Universities are changing, and core mission is still the same, but the way that we execute on things has to be different. And I just don't see a future where the SEC is not leading that.
So, Candice, when you talk about change and leadership, you recently made some hires: football coach, men and women's college basketball coach. My question is, when you think about leadership, and no one has a better vision for the school than you do because you've been there for so long and you understand the DNA, what qualities are you looking for to introduce to your student athletes as coaches?
Yeah, it's a great question. I appreciate that because one of the things I quickly learned is, you can have this vision for what you believe, the athletics department should be and the student athlete experience that you want to provide, but you have to have the right head coaches to do it. If you don't have the right head coaches and leaders in place to execute that, it doesn't matter how much I want it. There's only so much I can do from this space and this role. And so I think at this point now, over the past 6 years, I think I've hired 7 head coaches.
Wow.
Maybe eight with our new bowling coach. I think that's number 8. And I'm always looking for the same thing. It's really important to me that, I do understand the importance of recruiting. And let me tell you about Vanderbilt, because you don't know about Vanderbilt. And let me tell you about, everything that we're about. But I don't want to have to convince you to see what I see. What I do understand is that if I have to convince you at the beginning, I'm going to have to convince you when it's challenging. And we got to be all in, 2 feet in. And so I am looking for people that 2 feet in see Vanderbilt for the opportunity that it is. You're not going to be successful here if you come here and decide you suddenly want to change the things that are actually just uniquely who we are. You're not going to snap your fingers and have an alumni base that rivals the University of Texas. It's not going to happen, right? Because we have smaller enrollment. There are certain things that are non-negotiable. And you have to be not only okay with the non-negotiables, but you have to decide that can actually be an advantage for us. The academic reputation is an advantage for us. And so if you believe that, and of course you have to be great at the X's and O's, you got to deeply believe that this is an opportunity to change the trajectory of lives for young people. And you got to be a dog and want to win. For me, those are the things that I'm looking for.
And that opens up such an interesting conversation, Candice. And we were talking before we came on live about we had Jay Batt, who is now a colleague of yours in the SEC, when he was at Georgia Tech a year or so ago, and he had a cup of coffee at Michigan State, and now is back in the South where he belongs, as the AD at Kentucky. But one of the things he pointed out in the context of Georgia Tech, and I would say that spiritually, Georgia Tech and Vanderbilt are actually kind of similar. Again, sort of having grown up in that, in terms of especially now, high performing athletics, very high performing academics. One of the cases Jay made to us, and I wonder what you make of this, is that in this NIL world, high academics can actually be made to be a feature, not a bug in some sense, that because you can, be compensated for your athletic prowess, it becomes that much more important that you're at a school where you can get a really good education and you're sort of looking down the line. How do you figure that in? to recruiting athletes? You know, you talked about coaches, but how does it figure into the modern athlete who's coming out of high school? You know, there's a sliding doors. Alex and I were talking about this, where in this world, maybe Alex Rodriguez or a modern day Alex Rodriguez doesn't go straight to the pros and goes to a program like so. So what are those discussions with athletes right now in terms of what your proposition is?
You know, to be honest with you, I have felt like the academic selectivity, like the academic reputation. I mean, perhaps the way we talk about it's changed a little bit, but honestly, I don't know that the approach is really different just because there's NIL. Now, this is just my perspective. I think that, you know, we used to say, come to Vanderbilt, and instead of a 4-year decision, make a 40-year decision. Well, now with the ability to transfer multiple places, you know, I tell our staff, it might be a 4-month decision. Before that 4 months, right, we're going to show you why being a part of Vanderbilt is going to change the trajectory for you for years and years to come. Yeah, listen, the way student athletes have agency now and the ability to move from place to place, some of that may not register in the same way for some young people. But the reality is that if you weren't coming to Vanderbilt before because you weren't just compelled by the academic piece, I mean, if I really think about it, it's hard to turn down a world-class degree and you're also getting NIL support and you're also going to be a part of this network for life. And you have a chance to win a national championship. Like, if I can say those 4 things here, I'm not sure why that would not be compelling.
You can say that now in a way that you couldn't before.
That's
it's
exactly
a different
right.
proposition, I guess, is my point.
No,
Yeah.
and I think so. We could always say the academic side, but it's like, you know, you don't have to be unapologetic, or you don't have to be apologetic about it, right? And so now the academic side has never changed. But if I can tell you all the reasons why you say you might want to go somewhere else, well, I want to compete at the highest level. I want to go to the league. We've always sent people to, you know, X league. I want to get a great degree. Oh, I want to make sure y'all are competitive NIL wise. Oh, I want to make sure I have great facilities. We can say that now.
Candice, following up on what Jason said, I mean, I guess it doesn't apply because I would have to take the SAT 3 times, add them up, and I may qualify to go to Vanderbilt. But assuming in 1993, I got drafted by the Seattle Mariners, and I had no choice. I mean, I saw my mom collect food stamps at the age of 12. I was the number 1 pick by the Seattle Mariners. And as much as I wanted to go to the University of Miami, honestly, I just couldn't afford to it. If I was your son or if I was your younger brother, how would you advise me in thinking about that if the Mariners came calling today in 2026 or 27 and said, here's $1 million signing bonus, but Vanderbilt has what to offer?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I mean, I wish if Tim Corbin, our baseball coach, the legendary Tim Corbin, was on this call, you know, Tim Corbin would say, well, I mean, this is what I deal with every day now. And, you know, I'm really excited for him coming into this new year because the class that he's been able to retain and also keep from going to the pros and, you know, sprinkle in a few transfers. I mean, he has made that case. He's made that proposition because he said, listen, so you could go and you could turn pro now at the age of 17 or 18, or you could come here. And so number 1, the financial support is significant, right? So now let's take that off the table as a consideration. But you also now have the opportunity to train in this environment. To then prepare yourself. And, you know, again, baseballs are great. Like, I love that you asked the question because for us, we also do have the tradition to back it up in terms of the number of guys that we're putting in the big leagues. So I think you can check every box, but it's like the opportunity to you're not just getting an education. You're getting a great education on the baseball diamond, but also in the classroom. But financially, we can take that off the table now. You know, even in baseball now, there's more scholarships. You have NIL and rev share. You have there's more reasons to come here, but we can also provide that controlled environment for you, which gives you access to incredible resources. Like, we're in the middle of a baseball project right now. What they are going to have is first class. You know, and that's what we're trying to create. And you won't have, and again, I'm like an old has-been, was sort of okay basketball player. I don't know baseball, but I do understand if you have to go to the minors for a while and that lifestyle is different. and we can provide something much more compelling, I think, much more consistent with the development of young people,
Mm-hmm.
that then prepares you to go play a career in Major League Baseball. Like, that's what we want. Whatever that next chapter is for you, we think Vanderbilt is the place to prepare you, and you don't have to give things up. So, like, A-Rod, your point about I didn't have a choice. You would have choices now, though.
I'm fascinated by that because I had never heard someone say it quite that pointedly, Candice, and I'm glad you did, that for a lot of players, and again, and I'm not saying this because he's my partner and I like to gas him up, but like A-Rod is A-Rod. But there is a massive category of player who could get to the major leagues for whom, and you said it so well, the financial piece is now off the table.
That's right.
And so for Alex, it might not have been, but for a big swath of people. And so I guess with that in mind, I would ask you, as Congress considers this, as you guys, as you as Vanderbilt and as part of the SEC, in brief, like, what does the right structure look like to you? Like, the center will not hold right now,
That's right.
with this unlimited transfers.
That's right.
Money that is not really regulated in any meaningful way. What are the guardrails that need to exist from your perspective?
Yeah, I mean, just keeping it high level, I think, let me just say that the conversation that we just had, right, where we talked about, again, using A-Rod as the example, that, the opportunity to go to the University of Miami, but just could not afford it. This is such an important story because people need to think about the fact that college athletics also provides access to higher education for young people, right? Like, we don't really talk about it in that way, and we should be, and shame on us. And, for a lot of our guys that come to school now, they decide to come to school, they usually graduate. Like, they may have to come back, but that's important to them, right? So you're also then thinking of setting people up for their futures. How do we ensure that those opportunities are available to future student athletes? And I've been saying, look, we're either going to be the ones to kill it or to save it. I think the way that you save it, and we're going to need Congress's help. So we need a true national framework, like national rules that, you can't just run to a judge and sue and change the game midstream for people. Like, national rules, right, with the appropriate legal protections that allow you to enforce those rules so that all young people are playing by the same book, right? True competitors want to know that the person to the left and to the right of them is playing with the same set of rules, right? And then we go out there and we decide it on the field or the court, right? That's what everybody wants.
And that's specifically around transfer portal and eligibility.
And it's beyond that. It's around eligibility. It's around recruiting. It's around enforcement. It's around the way that the economic model and the finances of student athletes. So it's around all that. And I know you said keep it brief. I would just, if I'm hitting it and saying what's the perfect solution, national standards, the opportunity to share revenue directly with student athletes, I think is appropriate. I don't think there's anything wrong with that, especially considering the amount of money that's being generated by college athletics, right? So student athletes need to be a part of that equation. I do think people get scared when we start talking about capping things. I think that we should be able to share revenue as we can now because of the House settlement with student athletes. But the problem where you have sort of that unregulated marketplace, that's happening with third-party NIL. So I believe in NIL. Like, if you have a market, A-Rod has a brand and he can monetize that, good for you. But there needs to be a true market, right? And there needs to be some parameters around that. I don't think we need to, I don't want to take things away from student athletes, but if we're going to have, if we're going to be able to celebrate college athletics in 100 years, we better figure out how to have some stability. I think the ability to enforce rules. So, we have these national standards, but the enforcement piece is really, really important. And I just think that, again, trying to keep it really simple, how do you create stability so that young people understand the rules of engagement? They are still able to, take the financial consideration off the table so they can go to college if they want because they know they're getting money, but we still have some structure and a structure that can be sustained. And so there's all kinds of things right around making sure that women and women's sports and Olympic sports, like when you think about the Olympics, college athletics is the feeder system for the Olympics in so many sports. So we don't want to be so greedy that we erode a system that truly has global implications. And then there's Title IX and gender equity, and we can talk on and on and on. I mean, there are so many things, but the reality is, if I had to sum it up in one sentence, we need a national framework that is sustainable and enforceable.
That's easy.
No big deal. That's
Easy
all
to
we
fix.
need.
So if I had to put on my investor hat at, or someone who wants to make a donation to your school, I've seen and read where you've raised over $375 million. My question is around structure and ROI if I'm writing a check to your school. Now, I'm involved with the W and the NBA, and we have a CBA. And essentially, that's the Bible that we live by. We live and die by those,
Right.
both players and governors.
Right.
What is your pitch to me if I'm writing a check? How do I get an ROI? My concern is there are no rules, no parameters, and I invest into getting a couple players there, and by the time they're sophomore year, they're at someone else, another school competing against us.
Yeah, it's hard. I mean, I can honestly say I understand. I truly do understand why, to ask somebody to support NIL or to support today's roster, knowing that it could change tomorrow. I mean, this is why we do need. And when I'm thinking about the national framework, I am thinking about, how you curtail the transferring and we have not done a good job of telling our story and showing the ROI. And so, for example, there's true benefit for a young person competing in a sport and having the opportunity to do what they do long term. Long term, the implications are significant. Even short term, though, the affinity that it builds, the visibility of the brand, what it does for institutions. I do think if you do not have a built-in affinity for the place, that is not going to be as compelling for you. Right? Especially because of everything that's happening now with college sports. This is why, the ROI is probably not as clear to people. It's clear. I see it every day here. But the reality is that we're sort of mimicking professional sports in some ways and don't have the things that give the structure that you're talking about, Alex, right? This is a problem. Because we're sort of living in weird spaces. I personally, I know some of my colleagues would like to see us have a CBA, wouldn't mind student athletes being employees. I'm probably not on that page, but I am on the page of wanting structure, because right now it is hard, to your point, for me to tell you in I think a compelling way why you should give. I can sit here and tell you all the virtues of athletics. And that list is long, and I think we all know what they are. But the problem is that if we don't insert some stability so I can show you real outcomes and what happens if a young person comes and stays, if I can't show you that, then you're not going to want to give. And that's just the truth. I think we're different here. Of course I do, but I actually believe it. Right? I believe it at Vanderbilt, and I know what we do with young people, and I know what the proposition is, and we're actually delivering on it. But we also have kids that transfer out of here, because there's a bidding war and there's an opportunity. And so this is about the broader enterprise. The broader enterprise is in trouble right now. And no one in the broader enterprise, I think, with true awareness can say, no, invest in what this is today. Because it shouldn't be what it is today. And so that's my true answer. That's not... I don't think you're going to write me a check at the moment, but what I wanted people to see is, like at Vanderbilt, I feel like we're trying to do it differently, but the reality is that this is a story that's greater than Vanderbilt. Like, we have to save this enterprise or young people, because I can't bring all the young people here. Like, there are a lot of deserving young people that need opportunities, and right now we're not doing a good job of showing why college athletics needs to be here to stay. We're not doing a good job, and I, sort of compel Congress and others to help us get to a place where we can be proud of it.
Yeah. Well, hopefully that will happen, because I think all three of us love college sports. I love
Absolutely.
rooting. You know, it's in my blood from being a Southerner, as you know, and Alex from growing up in the shadow of University of Miami. Super interesting. Well, good luck this season.
Thank
We'll
you.
definitely be watching. And Vanderbilt, it's on the rise. You look at, everywhere you turn, Alex, it's in New York Magazine, it's on
Yeah.
ESPN, it's on The Athletic. No matter where you look, the Commodores are coming. All right, Candice, really good to spend some time with you.
Thank you
so much.
much. So nice to meet you all. Thank you for having me.